Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the first ever Public School Employees of Washington's Legislative Unconference. Tonight begins a week of events diving into the PSE issues and priorities for the 2021 legislative session. My name's Rich Dustin. I am the Legislative Council Chair, and I have the pleasure of introducing our first speakers. Please join me in welcoming Matt Haney, Director Strategic Research and Affairs for SEIU Local 6, and Sulan Milnerick, researcher at SEIU Healthcare 1199 Northwest, as they present information on the Custodial Bill of Rights. Please, just a note on the side, keep your questions, if you can, to the end of the presentation for the discussion group, or what we are now calling the unconference portion at 7:15. And so thank you, Matt and Sulan, for joining us.
Thank you, Rich. Thanks for the introduction. So I think we kind of want to start off tonight, talk a little bit about what work has been done in the janitorial worker safety kind of area the last few years. And then I'm going to hand it over to Sulan, who's going to talk about some of the policies we're thinking about moving forward and how we all can come together and help push this. Kind of to start off, I just wanted to make a note, you know, in the commercial janitorial industry, our members like to be called janitors. I understand a lot of PSE folks for custodians. There's also folks that Sulan helps represent, the EVS or environmental service workers. But if it's all right with you all, I'm going to stick with the terminology that I'm familiar with and refer to the cleaning work as janitorial. And so I will try to get my share screen up here and get us going. And there we go. So we started working on workload issues and how it responds to injury rates by really just stories from our members, them telling us, look, I'm having to, excuse me, I'm having to rush constantly. I'm not able to take breaks. I'm not able to take lunch because my supervisor is demanding all this work be done. We saw a lot of issues where our members, every July 1, they get raises, and you know, come the next week, we saw people getting laid off and their workloads being forced onto other workers. The amount of physical space that they have to clean increasing over time. You know, by about 12 years ago, our janitors were cleaning about 30,000 square feet per night per 8-hour shift. And we saw that growing to 50, 60,000 square feet. You know, folks were complaining about their injuries as well as, you know, just aches and stress and all that. So we did a little poking around. Oh, there we go. So the Seattle Municipal Tower, which is one of the biggest buildings in downtown Seattle, over 1 million square feet. This is a little updated, but right now there's about 21 janitors that are cleaning that building. And, you know, we were able to, you know, break that down to the average house size in Seattle, which equals now about 34 houses a night that they're cleaning. And so we went to the legislature with this issue initially back in well, I'm jumping ahead of myself. So we conducted a workload survey study with the University of Washington and the nonprofit group Casa Latina, who has some non-union janitorial kind of day worker folks. And we were able to compare the union janitors' work to the non-union, and kind of look at those demographics of who was who. And we were able to release the report back in August of 2013 that was a survey of over 350 janitors, and it really documented the increase in the work intensity they were experiencing, as well as the injuries. So in January of 2014, we introduced a bill that would cap the work of commercial janitors' work to 30,000 square feet per night in a regular 8-hour shift. There was a lot of pushback from the building owners and the employers on that. But we were able to get out of that legislative session in order for labor and industries to create a work group that included labor, which included Local 6, some WFC folks, as well as UFCW, but employers, and then BOMA. BOMA is the Building Owners and Managers Association. So how the commercial janitorial industry works is that the building owners and or property managers hire a janitorial contractor, and then those workers are union members. So we were able to look at some data that the L&I Sharp department had and make some recommendations. Of course, with the employers and the building owners, those recommendations were a little soft, but that we were through that, they had to report back to the legislature. So that report was released to the legislature in January of 2015, and we also reintroduced a little modified workload legislation around that. Some of the things we found out in that work group, which we already had some knowledge of, but during that time, for the previous 10 years, janitors had been in the top 10 for compensable L&I claims. So meaning compensable is meaning the state was paying out money. Those injuries were, yes, they happened on the job. Yes, we owe you money. So there's 313 industries that L&I recognizes, and again, janitors have been in the top 10, going clear up to 4, as you see there at one point. We also did a comparison of janitorial services to other service-related sectors, and as you see here, the rates were much higher. We're able to break down some demographics data, and out of that, we saw that female janitors were more likely to get injured, as well as folks who were less on the job. So in commercial janitorial, there's a lot of turnover, and that's where we saw a lot of the injuries happening in those new folks coming in without the experience or the training how to do those jobs. It's kind of the other piece was that a lot of our members who come from all around the world, English isn't their primary language, but the employers tend to only provide training and their supervisory pieces in English. And so that was seen as part of a reason why some of our folks were getting injured. So we followed that up. We worked with the legislature after that 2015 legislative session to get a health impact review. This is a study that's done by the Washington State Board of Health that looks at policies and how they impact the health disparities around the state. So really the idea was, when we talked about workload to the employers and the building owners, we got dismissed a lot. You know, it's like, oh, you know, oh, you have too much work. Well, everyone has too much work, you know, like that sort of ridiculousness. I'm watching my language. So the health impact review was released, and it showed our legislation could reduce health disparities, decrease injury rates, and lead to greater compliance among commercial janitorial employers. So what we really were doing, because of this resistance, we built the University of Washington report. On top of that, the L&I report, the health impact review. So really kind of building up the our fight with real information, facts that we could put on the ground to fight against being just dismissed about having too much work. Then in 2016, we introduced another bill that directed L&I, or SHARP, which is the kind of science and study end of L&I, that doesn't have to worry about enforcement or anything like that, that can just look at the numbers. To really, we're asking for them to conduct this study. We failed to get that to, although it passed in committee, we failed to get it to the floor vote. And so then back in 2017, we reintroduced it, but it was held up. So in 2018, we were able to work with the governor's office to include that 2-year study in a budget proviso. So we got that funded. And then in August, the first advisory committee for that study got together. In the fall, L&I started to conduct janitorial focus groups to understand what they needed to be studying, and then have gone and been doing lots of interviews with janitors. Sorry, I got a 2-year-old in the background. One of the things that they wanted to do, which we've had problems with, is they wanted to actually get in the buildings and watch the work being done and how it was being done. There's been a lot of resistance from the employers and the building owners to make that happen. But we're still trying to caress that and see if we can get more of that information. So that study is continuing to go on. We helped the folks at L&I also apply for a grant that would bring in some more money to do more studying around janitors' workloads. And then in the summer of 2019, we started building a multi-union work group of labor unions that have any sort of cleaning, janitorial members that they represent, to really create a comprehensive policy that will include all the cleaners and pushes a janitorial Bill of Rights. So that's kind of the history. Of course, the 2020 session got blown up on us, and so we're looking now as to get some policy, get legislators thinking about this more comprehensive policy and moving forward. And with that, I'll pass it over to Sulan. I guess I need to unshare my screen. Where's that stuff here? There we go.
Thanks, Matt. It was so good to hear all of what you had to say. I'm gonna get my screen pulled up. Okay. Let's see. So like Matt was talking about, there's this long legacy, so much thanks and gratitude to Local 6 for all of their work, bringing janitorial issues to the forefront of labor and industries. That is incredible and groundbreaking work that they've been struggling through. And our side in healthcare, our members who do janitorial work like to be called environmental service workers, EVS workers. And EVS workers at 1199 Northwest work in a variety of situations. They might clean in critical care settings. They might clean in behavioral health settings. They may be employees of the state. They may work alone with one person at night, or they may have hundreds of coworkers during the day. Our union has maybe about an eighth or a tenth of our union membership are EVS workers. And so a lot of the themes that we found at the table, which I'm going to talk about today, are themes that we heard from PSC leadership, we've heard from Local 6 leadership, and we hear from our own membership in the context of talking about what is the impact of their work. So those themes really have shaped the focus of our janitorial table, where we are talking about legislature and bringing our members' issues to the forefront of not only our legislative process, but also really the bodies that are supposed to be accountability measures for our members. So some of the themes that we see, I guess the other thing I should say is EVS workers in our local are integrated into our contracts. So when we bargain for everybody at our healthcare setting, similar to PSC who works for the hospital. And so we've seen, like at Swedish, we went on strike in January. At Swedish Health System in Seattle, we went on strike in January. And the work issues of environmental service workers was at the forefront of our bargaining. EVS workers shared stories of workplace harassment, retaliation and bullying, including from coworkers, because the expectation of how quickly they were supposed to work or how much they were supposed to work, but mainly from management, who continues to just ratchet up people's work loads to be more and more, both in quantity and then also in how much they're supposed to get done in a certain time period. So the themes that we focus our janitorial legislative table on are many, but some of the main four highlighted focuses are repetitive stress injury and other workplace injury. So we know that many of our EVS workers have gotten wrist, hip, and knee surgery because of the nature of their job, and also are filing L&I claims at very high rates. We also know that there's specific workplace mechanisms that are injuring our workers that management just doesn't want to maybe pay to update or improve. The next issue that we're thinking about is around harassment and issues of isolated working conditions. Our membership is largely women, and it's largely women of color who experience not only racism, but also sexual harassment at work, particularly when they work in environments where they're isolated and there's maybe one other person around during their working time. The third issue is staffing levels that make sense for the particular industry. So in hospital settings, we routinely get this question that we should be assessing our workload on a square footage basis, which in some ways we would accept because we would like any way to negotiate how to control our workload. But in hospital settings in particular, we're saying that not every square foot of the hospital is the same. A hallway would take one amount of time to clean, and a critical care unit room would take a different amount of time to clean because of the types of cleaning that need to happen, different levels of sanitation, and of course, the amount of surfaces present. So those are three of the main industry issues that we gather. And then most importantly, in my opinion, is building among all of us across the state, really building strong multi-union unity around people who do cleaning work in the state of Washington. And so this table is incredible. It is like actually so exciting. We have on our janitorial table people who are unions that are healthcare unions, are unions that are education unions, are unions that are work in business settings, and are unions that work in hospitality settings. We are made up of custodians, janitors, environmental service workers, and housekeepers, and we are all across the public sector and also the private sector. We span the gamut. Yes, thank you, Chris. And so the unions that come to this table are also across the state in this really incredible way. We have PSC, of course, is there. We have 1199, my union, Local 6, where Matt's from. But we also have 925, we have the Teamsters, we have WPA, Unite Here, NEA, AFSCME, and Local 21 of USCW. So we are all here and we are all ready. Okay, so our legislative focus is really centered around this idea of a janitorial Bill of Rights. And so as Matt was describing, this theme that we see happen across many of our unions, where we're seeing this increase, this ratcheting up of workload, expectations of different types of work, and ultimately more work with fewer people. And so the things that we are looking to do is to fight collectively. And so instead of just having these individual fights happen only at our union shops, we're looking to continue that, and then also think of what does it look like to build legislative power on a state level for janitorial workers, particularly thinking about what would be a worker janitorial Bill of Rights. California has an incredible example, particularly focused on the injury and illness prevention program. This bill was passed by Unite Here. I'm very grateful for their groundbreaking work. This musculoskeletal injury program is a program of LNI in the state of California, which is called, it's their OSHA program. So Occupational Health and Safety Agency. So this section is intended to control the risk of musculoskeletal injuries and disorders to keep housekeepers in hotels and other lodging establishments. So they're saying that the purpose of this is to control the risk, reduce the risk that hotel workers are experiencing due to musculoskeletal injuries and disorders. Each employer covered in this section shall establish, implement, and maintain an effective written program that addresses the hazards. So this is saying that the state is requiring employers to be clear and have a written program that would prevent workers from being injured on the job, or particularly addresses those hazards. Additionally, the employers are required to provide a training and record keeping. And so this is where we see our other work being important. You know, employers very usually don't just give us what we want. So like how Matt was talking about, employers providing trainings and languages that the employees don't speak and maybe is not their first language to understand. So making sure that the things that we're fighting for are really in alignment with the needs of our members, as different as they are. And then the other thing I wanted to highlight from this particular example that we think is really great and would like to build our Janitor Bill of Rights off of is that it should be noted that this rule does not develop universal standards of working conditions across the board, but it requires employers to establish, implement, and maintain a program for safer working conditions. So together we can come to the table and really all hold accountable our own employers and our own industries with some specific habits. Or standards, excuse me. And so really taking the best things that we've learned, like Matt outlined, from the state of Washington and other states like California, who are starting to build these programs to keep us safe at work and to keep our employers accountable for our safety, that we're finding these injuries mainly happen because our workloads are more than appropriate and we're not getting the proper ergonomic training or support. So we're looking forward to this Janitorial Bill of Rights, which brings me to our timeline. So like Matt talked about, we gathered ourselves up over the last 2019, 2020, and really are starting to talk about how do we lay the groundwork? How do we get janitorial members across the state to be in conversation with each other and share these themes that we talked about to build our Janitorial Bill of Rights? What are the issues that are the most important to us, and what are the universal solutions that we have across our memberships? And then really moving towards a robust legislative program in 2022. And being super excited to have built the unity across our unions within our Washington State janitorial industry. So, whoop, whoop. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here with y'all today, and look forward to the unconference sections both tonight to hear your feedback and thoughts, any questions, and then also on Saturday.
Great. Thank you so much, Salon and Matt. We really appreciate your time. Everyone, we're putting in the chat right now and sending out to everybody the link for the meeting this after, or the unconference session that is happening at 7:15. So you've got a bit of a break before now, but we thank you all for attending and hope to see you in about 20 minutes on the unconference session. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening. Yeah.